has rocked South Africa. This time, 5 lives were taken in a brutal and senseless attack at a tavern in the Choba informal settlement in Olievenhoutbosch, Centurion. Armed gunmen stormed the premises, opening fire without warning, killing 2 women and 3 men and injuring at least 10 others. While the motive remains unknown, police are investigating and the Serious and Violent Crime Unit is pursuing suspects. But beyond the crime scene is a deeper story, one about South Africa's unresolved spatial legacy. The Good Party has come out strongly, saying this tragedy reflects not only a policing failure, but the consequences of decades of poor spatial planning that continue to trap communities in cycles of poverty, crime and vulnerability. Now, joining us from Cape Town is Brett Herron, Secretary General of the Good Party. Brett, always good to speak to you. Appreciate your time this afternoon. Now, let's begin with your reaction when you heard about the shooting. What was your first thought?
Good afternoon, Hugo, and thank you. My first thought was about the location of the shooting and how there is a pattern that is emerging across South Africa, where these mass shootings, which appear to be gang-related very often, are occurring in townships or communities, if you can call them communities, that reflect our apartheid spatial legacy. So these waves of violence, this mass shooting, which is happening more frequently and a lot here in the Western Cape in particular, where I live, seems to be located within the walls almost of the old apartheid townships and the informal settlements, products really of poor post-apartheid spatial transformation programs. We have not resolved our spatial inequalities. And if you look at where these shootings are occurring, they are largely occurring in communities that were created by the Group Areas Act and post-1994 in large free basic housing developments that perpetuate the logic of the apartheid spatial plan.
How do you respond to those who say this is simply a policing issue and not about infrastructure or planning?
I think the reaction is always to focus on policing, and given the recent revelations by General Mkhwanazi in KwaZulu-Natal, the links between organized crime and senior police officers and possibly leading political office bearers is an important question, and is perhaps partly why we're unable to properly police and to solve these kinds of crimes or prosecute them. But if we focus only on policing, we're not addressing the root causes of crime. We cannot overlook the characteristics of these communities, the socioeconomic characteristics that are linked to the underinvestment, the underdevelopment, the overcrowding, the higher densities of these apartheid-era locations where these shootings are taking place, and how those characteristics are conducive to this kind of crime and the prevalence of the violent crime that we're seeing.
Well, the one thing I'd certainly like to talk about is the prevalence of these mass shootings and the reaction of police, certainly in apprehending those that are responsible for them. A thought I'd like you to hold on to. We're going to come back to it in a moment. Brett Herron, please stay on the line. We have on the line Brett Heron, Secretary General of the Good Party, in conversation with us around that mass shooting that left 5 people dead in Centurion. Now, Brett, we were talking about the prevalence of mass shootings across the country and obviously the absence of capturing of these criminals. Just your reaction to what police are able to do or have not been able to do in finding these criminals.
Well, as I said earlier, I think obviously we need to take into account whether we have a clean policing service. And given the accusations or allegations made by the Provincial Commissioner of KwaZulu-Natal recently, those are legitimate questions to have around whether our policing is clean and able to conduct the policing work that they need to do. But policing is reactive mostly. There is a crime prevention component to policing, but if we ignore the root causes of violent crime, which is prevalent in certain communities in South Africa, then we're never going to actually solve the problem. And if we focus only on policing, we fail those communities because we relegate them to continue to live in underdeveloped, overcrowded environments in which they are basically in poverty traps. Policing and organized crime, that would explain some of the failures.
Now, very quickly, Brett, you've said before that these are zones of neglect. So let's talk about the practical steps that municipalities and national government can take to address spatial inequality and obviously this rather important link to crime.
Well, our municipalities and our governments have been talking about transforming our cities and urban areas for a very, very long time. And it's in almost every policy document. But taking the step to actually effect transformation seems to be impossible for them to do, or there's a lack of willingness to do it. Spatial transformation has 2 components, really, as far as I'm concerned. Firstly, there's the need to integrate our cities and our towns, and that is by making sure that there's affordable housing in well-located areas, whereas these communities are largely on the outskirts of towns and cities, removed from economic and opportunities and services and amenities. So there's a need to integrate our towns and cities through making sure that through housing programs we are building affordable housing in better locations. But then there's also the redress of underinvestment in those existing townships. They were designed with underinvestment and underdevelopment, and we need to be improving the facilities, the socioeconomic conditions, and the economic opportunities in those communities. So those communities are not all going to be relocated in a spatially transformed South Africa, but in a spatially transformed South Africa, those communities will also have opportunities, the socioeconomic opportunities that many of us take for granted where we live.
Brett Heron, Secretary General of the Good Party, always good to speak to you, speaking to us on how spatial transformation can be used to mitigate crime and some of those mass shootings that we've experienced in recent times.